It's my job, I guess, over the next few minutes, just to give you a quick bit of background as to what this seminar is about, what Public Health Network Cymru is, do my sales pitch for the network. I don't know how many of you are existing members. Hopefully by the end of today, you'll all go away and sign up on the website and become members. Public Health Network Cymru has been around in one form or another for about 12 years or more, although in its present format, it's only been in existence for the last 2 years. It started as 4 thematic national public health networks that covered specific topics. We had a public health network for physical activity, there was a nutrition one, a sexual health one, and a mental health promotion network. And then, as I say, a couple of years ago, we had a review of where we were going with this. They all did very similar things. I had the same team available to me over the last 10 years who have been doing the work for coordinating these networks. And we decided to bring them together, amalgamate them, and extend the reach so that we actually covered all topic areas, all population groups, all settings, all social determinants, and so on. Now, the network is essentially a resource. It's out there, and it's predominantly there, not just for people who have public health in their job title, but actually for the vast majority of people who deliver on public health, which are often in different sectors, different professions. It includes practitioners, researchers, policy advisors, policymakers, a whole range of people right across the board. And we're there as a resource to garner that collective intelligence, if you like, the collective experience of all these people, and try to bring it to one place and make it available to the whole workforce so that we can all work together towards improving public health in Wales. So we have the usual things you'd expect from a network. We have a website, which I hope you will visit when you get a chance. On there you will find a whole range of stuff. There's loads of stuff. It's a very interactive website. It has the usual sort of news and events sections. It's got ranges by topic, by setting, everything you can imagine. There is data and information. There's access to research. There's we provide access to e-bulletins, which come out monthly, often themed e-bulletins around different topics. We have forums, so that if you want to set up a forum around a particular interest that you have and talk to other people around Wales or wider, then you can. We provide information from the very local level right up to international level. On top of the website, as I said, we already have the e-bulletins, we have road shows, and we have events, we have conferences, and we have this series of seminars. And one of the things that we did when we re-established the network 2 years ago is we decided to change the way it operated. It was very much we would sit in the centre down in our ivory tower in Cardiff and just pump out information to people. And we wanted it to be much more iterative, much more informed by the members. Being a member of the network was really just signing a form and then accessing the information. We want the members to be able to dictate to some extent the agenda. And this is a good example of that. So what we did at the end of every year, we go out to the members and we poll them, and we send out about 12 or 15 very disparate and diverse public health topics and ask people to rank them. If they wanted to attend a seminar, an event around a topic, which would they do? So they vote. And effectively what we do every year is we have 3 seminars and 1 national conference. And the seminars are determined this way. And this is why we have today this seminar, because this came out actually top of the poll last year of interest from our members, was behaviour change and particularly in its role in addictive behaviours. And that was when that was decided, so that's why we're here today. And it's great news, and I'm really pleased, because as a health promotion specialist, behaviour change is my bread and butter, really, and it's something I have a passion for. And a lot of other people have too, it would appear. So we're really delighted to be able to bring that to you today. Other events, just to flag this up, it's my sales pitch, is we go out once a year and we just introduce people to the network. In the past, it's been a bit of a promotional thing. We go out, we go around Wales, we say hello to people, we encourage people to join as members, and that's something I urge you to do. And as I said, you can do it online. Free to join, doesn't cost anything. Go on there. The benefit of being a member is you get heads up on things like these events very early on, before anybody else. You can you can only access certain parts of the website as a member, as a registered member, setting up forums, for example, sending information for the shared practice database. All that stuff can only happen. And you also get a tailored landing page, tailored to your interests, because you can understand that public health is a vast array of topics, some of which you may have no interest in. So you can tailor the kind of information that you get when you first land on the website. And we do these roadshows every year. We go out, and we'll be doing them in the next month or so. So we're coming back to Conwy. We're coming to North Wales in 2 weeks' time, I think on the 18th. So if you do want to find out more about the network, please do come along to that. We've made it a little bit more, hopefully, a bit more useful. There's an element of training associated with it. We're going to do some MEC training on that particular, on the roadshow this year. And we're going to be showcasing some local projects and initiatives. So that's taking place, and again, you can get all the details from the website, and you can register directly on there.
Okay, thank you very much. I feel slightly fraudulent, actually, because I no longer do work for Alcohol Concern, and at my leaving do, which was a mocktail party run by a young person in Point, and more of that later. One of the people I've worked with in Fishguard said, welcome to the great unwashed. So I actually finished working with Alcohol Concern on the 31st of March, which was also the date when Alcohol Concern merged with Alcohol Research UK. I don't know if they've got a new name or anything yet, but the two events aren't connected. My wife sent me a text just now to say, what a shame that you're talking at 10 o'clock when the Queen is making some huge announcement. We're obviously in competition with that, but she also rather irreverently said it's not actually about Voldemort returning, she's got a new corgi, but you know. Anyway, so that's all totally irrelevant. But what I'm here to talk about is, very briefly, I've got about 15 minutes to talk about a 3-year project that we ran in Fishguard and Goodwick, which, for those who don't know, is a small-ish community, about 5,000 people in North Pembrokeshire. I actually live in Newport, which is sometimes known as Little England by the Sea. But that's about sort of 10, 15 minutes drive from there. And I worked full-time for 3 years on this project. I might put that on again, but it was just to give you a kind of brief idea. It's actually worth saying the project generated a lot of press coverage and posters and all sorts of activity. That's my scrapbook, which I keep, which you're welcome to have a look at lunchtime. And also I will put out some copies of just a brief extract from a handbook that my colleague Andrew Meisel, who's the director of Alcohol Concern Cymru, has developed. I think there's actually 10 physical copies of this in the world at the moment, so it's a treasured little piece of information, but it is available, or is going to be available online, and there's a link on the handout if you want to get in touch with Andrew to learn more. So, but what I'd like to start with, and this may involve you having to kind of just sit by somebody if you're not literally sitting by somebody at the moment, I'd just like you to talk for a couple of minutes, and I'm not going to ask you to feedback or anything, but just about what you're good at in life. It might be about in your work, it might be about in your social life, it doesn't matter. But I'd just like you to talk for a couple of minutes only about what you're good at. Okay? Okay, folks. Come back. Come in. Thank you. Thanks for doing that. So I'm not going to embarrass anybody by asking, but I hope you had some good conversations. And there is a rationale for that, and I'll explain more. But just to say that you know, this has been a fairly sort of, it was interesting hearing the stuff about kind of the intuitive, experiential thing. This has been a very kind of experience-led piece of activity, really, and relied a lot upon people's intuition. But it does have a kind of theoretical construct to it. And I promise this is the only kind of quote I'll come out with, really, but this is from Dr. Harold Holder, writing in 1998. He said, drinking is not only a personal choice, but also a matter of custom and social behaviour. Until prevention efforts cease to focus narrowly on the individual and begin to adopt broader community perspectives on alcohol problems and strategies to reduce them, these efforts will fail. in traditional approaches, the well-intended people who introduce prevention programs into communities have rarely considered community settings as adaptive dynamic systems, complex arrangements with parts that change over time and often in unexpected ways. And I guess in that sense, that was where Andrew and Mark, my colleagues at Alcohol Concerns, started with this. In a sense, we're saying, well, could we try and have a different sort of conversation about alcohol and how it impacts upon ourselves and the people that we love, and indeed the people that we don't love at all and don't like and wish they'd go and live somewhere else. It was to kind of try and get that conversation going. I came into that with a fairly sort of minimal background in some ways in the alcohol sector. And years ago, I ran a night shelter in Southampton, and the vast majority of the people who came through the doors there were people who'd got fairly serious problems and dynamics as a consequence of their heavy use of alcohol. But I'd been much more involved in work around older people and mental health and diversity type stuff for many years. But so it was kind of interesting to come back and be very focused about alcohol. And I guess the other thing of interest is that the community didn't really want to focus on alcohol at all. What they were saying is, well, actually, we'd like to just see this as a much bigger piece. And so in a sense, we kind of, we minored on the alcohol type messages, and we majored on the community involvement. And out of that, we got quite a lot of direct conversations, discussions, and some impacts or outcomes, which I'll outline at the end, around alcohol itself. So the other bit that I brought to the table here really was having been quite strongly and closely involved in the whole kind of asset-based community development type approach, which is something that seems to have entered the consciousness of lots and lots of different organisations and individuals. And that's the link to what I've just asked you to do, because I think, I don't know whether you've done this, but often in my working life, when I've gone into a community setting, and I mean a community setting could be half a dozen people living in a shared home for people with mental health problems, through to 4,000 or 5,000 people, Fishguard and Goodwick, who will identify themselves as community members in all sorts of different ways. But what I know I've done is I've gone into lots of those places and said, okay, so what's wrong here? And how are we going to sort it out? And actually the basic premise of what we did in this piece of work was to go into that community and say, what's strong here and how can we help you to further the strengths within your community about what you're doing and how you approach these issues. I have a great friend, Cormac Russell, who has a lovely phrase that I like, which is that needs analysis needs analysis. And I think that's got a lot of truth. And that particularly comes from having been immersed in working, as say, with older people, and by that often people who are, there's all sorts of definitions about older people, aren't they? I'm one, of course, because I'm 58 next week. Well into the older people strategy as far as that's concerned. But actually, I've done a lot of work with people in their 80s and 90s who, of course, do very often feel very excluded, and who often are sort of seen in terms of what are your problems and what are your needs? And actually what I'm interested in is what can you do? Because you can always do something. And I guess that was our other starting point with this, is that everybody has something to give and something to bring. So I'm kind of compressing a 3-year history into 15 minutes. So what we did very early days, and I won't describe the process, but we got to meet with about 60 different individuals who live within Fishguard and Goodwick, and we got them really to tell us what it was that they felt we should do. So we very genuinely said, we haven't got an agenda. This is what Alcohol Concern is about. This is where our heart lies. I guess you can describe our vision as being one of a world where alcohol doesn't harm people. We're not about telling people not to drink, but we are about sort of talking about it not doing damage to themselves or to other people. But so, we're beyond that, really, we said to people, but, what should we do? The initial reaction, to be honest, was, well, you should pack up and go somewhere else. Why are you picking on us and identifying us as a group of people with, chronic alcohol problems? So we talked that through, and we kind of got over that particular perception, but it's a fair one, I think. And then, in essence, people then kind of said, well, you know, there isn't really anything, you know, well, blimey, you're here for 3 years full time. What you know, what are you going to do? Kind of a bit more interest when I was able to say, well, actually, we've got a small budget to fund community events, which has actually gone a long way. I should say the project was funded by the Big Lottery, and many thanks to them. But really people sort of said, well, actually there aren't that many issues here. Really. What would you do? And at the end of the first day, they'd identified 72 areas of work that they thought the project should actually be engaged with. So, you know, actually quite a lot, really, even for a full-time person. So we boiled that down into 3 broad areas. And what people in that community, and I think this would vary, obviously, depending where you were and where you found yourself, but what people said was, we'd like you to do anything that you can do to kind of raise awareness in general about alcohol and how it affects us, how it works, good, bad, or indifferent. The second one, very, very specific actually, was people were wanting to something about the way that we as adults role model our drinking behaviours to young people and children. That was a very specific thing that partly came out of a couple of individuals who were very exercised about that kind of issue. And then the third and the broadest area was people were saying, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but people said, well, anything that you can do around loneliness and isolation would be a really good thing, because actually we see that as citizens, we see loneliness and isolation as something that affects people of all ages, of all classes, of all persuasions, and what people were saying to us was, well, it might be not sort of 2 + 2 = 4, but it might be that if people are lonely, sad, isolated, that might be one of the reasons they would drink more than is necessarily good for them. And I guess a story that illustrates that was a local person. We put on a seminar about health and well-being at some point, who said the person who was most perceptive about my drinking too much after the death of my husband was the undertaker. That was the only person who actually recognised what I was doing. And this was a person who had, a lot of other kind of professionals and very caring people around her. But in that sense, that's the kind of stuff I would never have thought of that, because she said, you must ask the undertakers this seminar, because they really know about this stuff, I would never have thought of that, probably in 100 years. So it's kind of always interesting when you involve, the public as to what they come up with. So what did we do? Well, we did all sorts of things. I'm not going to be able to run this slideshow probably, but we had the premiere of a film called A Royal Hangover, which I don't know if it ever kind of made the main circuit, but it's a fascinating film, although rather appalling. We put on a community play, which I will say a little bit more about in a minute. We did stuff around time banking and sharing. We did poetry festivals, obviously, Dylan Thomas knew a bit about booze one way or another. We did public awareness type events, and we did lots and lots of tea dances. A very particular thing that people talked about, this was primarily kind of older people, was how lovely it would be to have something to do on a Sunday that didn't actually have alcohol at the centre of it. So we ran tea dances. And really nice piece of news for me is that a group of people from the Friendship Circle, which is a group for people aged, I think, over 55, have recently got more funding to run more tea dances. So that's kind of running on there. They've become a bit of a Fishguard fixture. Although they were running the Fishguard Bay Hotel, and there was one a guy that was visiting there one day, and he sort of rather grumpily put his nose through the door. So it looked like a bloody tea dance to me, But I think he was expecting the Ritz and the kind of the Savoy Palm Court Orchestra, and we had 2 guys called Jockabilly. Jock is an 80-year-old bloke who belts it out and does a particularly good Mick Jagger impersonation. And anyway, so those tea dances were kind of quite different. We say myriad activities, but 2 or 3 to highlight. We got very involved in a thing called the Sound of the Youth, which again is something that's running on now, where young people wanted to run their own music events, because they felt that there was lots of music in Fishguard. There is lots of great music in Fishguard. It's a folk festival, a jazz festival, an international kind of classical music festival, but the young people felt there was nothing for them. They also wanted these to be events that didn't have alcohol involved, primarily because there were a lot of younger, kind of 10, 11-year-olds there. But they sort of said, well, it's just really boring, having kind of Coke and lemonade and all that kind of stuff. Can't we do something better? So one of the bits we invested in was we got loads and loads of blenders and ice machines and things like that. And we started running mocktail parties, non-alcoholic cocktail parties. So everybody, was at this sort of Sound of the Youth, walking around feeling a bit like James Bond, or there isn't a woman James Bond, is there? There should be, anyway, whoever that would be. But feeling very sophisticated and so on, but actually not falling down at the end of the evening. And the Sound of the Youth is continuing and has won an award for a youth innovation project and all sorts of things. We did some very particular work with the local sixth form, Ysgolbro Gwaun, and they ran 2 conferences about alcohol and the community, and they went out and talked to people of all ages and about what was it like? What was it like when drinking in your day, sort of granddad? And of course we're interested and slightly appalled when they knew how many pubs there had been in Fishguard and Goodwick as opposed to how many there are now. But also I think probably quite interested to learn that binge drinking isn't necessarily a new phenomenon. So there was some very constructive work, and one of the things that was lovely, two young women, Klinos and Fionn, actually wrote their own pamphlet to give to parents, which is what parents need to tell teenagers about alcohol. So they're kind of reverse psychology perhaps, but rather than this is a young people's problem, this is actually a bit more of an older people's problem, as I think is something apparently in the papers today about the problem drinking is now the over 65s rather than younger people who are drinking less. So apparently it's in the Telegraph or the Mail or one of those. So that was a piece of work we did. We did a very interesting piece of community theatre with a drama group at Theatre Gwaun, which is a community-run venue. And I think we paid for a professional playwright to turn people's stories into a script, and then they performed them. And I think we had about 130 people in the audience, and about 40 people got involved. And if I have time, I'll just very quickly say a little bit about the feedback about that. The loneliness and isolation piece, to say, was enormous. Lots of the activities were actually about that kind of problem. Not that problem, but that kind of issue. And one of the things that the local journalist, the local paper, was very supportive of the project. He said that one of his favourite headlines that he's ever written was Shanghai, Dubai, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Fishguard and Goodwick are one of 14 pilot sites for a World Health Organization pilot study on indicators for age-friendly communities. He said, I just loved writing that. So we kind of put Fishguard and Goodwick on the map there about that as well. Loads and loads, just to say, a plethora of activities. The final one that was possibly one of my favourite things is that just before, on St David's Day actually, we had what we believe to be Wales's and possibly the UK's first zero alcohol beer festival in Fishguard and Goodwick Rugby Club, which is kind of like when two worlds collide. I'm fascinated by the whole dynamic about sports and drinking, because there's this whole thing about let's go out and have a really good game and lose a bit of weight and get fit, and then let's go back and get absolutely bladdered in the bar afterwards, sort of thing. It's an interesting thing. But so that's the kind of stuff we did. So what difference did it make? Very, very quickly. We have been quite comprehensively evaluated through Participation Cymru, and so there's lots of there are specific pieces of evaluation. I was really interested in the theatre one. They did a questionnaire at the end of the Theatre Gwaun one, which was called "It's the Drink Talking," and I think about 90 people completed the questionnaire. 75% agreed the performance had helped them understand more about the effects of alcohol. 71% agreed it had helped them to understand what quote-unquote sensible drinking is. 69% agreed it would make it easier for them to resist pressure to drink alcohol, for example, from friends. And 67% said it made them think differently about what type of people are likely to drink excessively. And 52% agreeing the performance had made them think about how much they drank themselves. And I really kind of like that, because that was local people saying this is what we want to do, rather than alcohol concerns saying this is what we think you ought to do about these issues. It was getting that conversation going, but in a kind of literally dramatic way. And you know, at the end of the project, these are just 3 or 4 figures, and I say I'll leave these handouts for people if you're interested in taking them away, and the contacts to Andrew are there. At the end of the project, 54% of people agreed or strongly agreed there was very little drinking in public places locally, compared with 33% at the start. So that was a 21% increase. 55% agreed or strongly agreed that there was very little alcohol-related antisocial behaviour, and that was compared with 32% at the start, so there was a 23% increase there. There was a 14% increase in people agreeing that there was a good range of alcohol-free opportunities to socialise in the local area. And there was a 10% increase in terms of people, 75% of people said that they would know where to seek help with an alcohol problem, and that compared with 65% at the start of the project. So some statistics. I wouldn't want to make enormous claims for this, beyond the fact that you know, we've had masses and masses of amounts of conversation, and that was really, in a sense, what we hoped and intended to do. So I think I should stop there. Thank you very much. And because it's Star Wars Day, may the 4th be with you.